Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am so glad you're here with us because today we are taking on a topic that is honestly surrounded by so much confusion, emotional chaos, and let's be real, a lot of internet misinformation. We are talking about narcissistic personality disorder, but we aren't just throwing around buzzwords today. We're going to break down a clear clinical blueprint to really understand how to identify this disorder, the actual real-world impact it has, and most importantly, some highly tactical disengagement strategies. So, get comfortable and let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is exactly what we're covering today. First, decoding narcissistic personality disorder. Then, we'll look at the mask and the fear, examine the real cost of abuse, map out a disengagement blueprint, and finally, we'll talk about surviving the extinction burst.
Section 1. Decoding narcissistic personality disorder. Let's ground this in clinical reality.
So, our very first goal here is to step entirely away from all those pop psychology buzzwords and establish a firm clinical baseline. You see, there is actually a massive difference between NPD, which is a formal diagnosable mental disorder, and just general narcissism, which is a personality trait. Honestly, we all have some narcissistic traits, right? It varies from person to person. But NPD is an entirely different beast. It's a distinct category, and we've got to keep that clinical distinction front and center as we move forward. The absolute hallmarks of narcissistic personality disorder are grandiosity, a staggering lack of empathy, and an insatiable need for admiration. And listen, these aren't just bad moods or a phase. For a clinical diagnosis, these specific behaviors have to be consistently evident across multiple areas of a person's life. That means they're showing up at work, in their romantic relationships, and right in the middle of family dynamics, all at the exact same time.
To really wrap our heads around this disorder, we actually need to look inside their cognitive world first. The diagnostic symptoms begin with a deeply inflated sense of self-importance. Internally, they are completely preoccupied with sweeping fantasies. We're talking fantasies of unlimited success, immense power, brilliance, beauty, or even ideal love. They hold on to this steadfast belief that they are uniquely special. And because of that, they genuinely believe they can only be understood by or should only associate with other people or institutions they consider elite or gifted, basically just to boost their own self-esteem. As you can imagine, all of this breeds a really intense sense of entitlement.
Now, what's fascinating is how those internal delusions inevitably spill over into the real world. Because they feel so incredibly entitled, they demand excessive admiration from everyone around them. And that directly leads to the active exploitation of others, literally just using people as tools to get what they want. When you combine that exploitation with their fundamental lack of empathy, they are almost always described as arrogant, self-centered, manipulative, and demanding. Plus, they harbor deep envy of others, or on the flip side, they delusionally believe everyone is envious of them. Ultimately, they simply cannot handle criticism or defeat. It shatters them.
Section 2. The mask and the fear. Let's uncover the underlying psychology here.
This perfectly illustrates the core dichotomy of NPD. That massive, inflated ego, the grandiosity, the arrogance we just talked about, it's really just a mask. It's an entirely false self. And it's built for one single purpose, to hide the fear. You see, at their absolute core, narcissists are terrified of being exposed to the world and honestly, exposed to themselves as ordinary, flawed, or toxic. So all that grandiose behavior, it's merely a defense mechanism protecting an incredibly vulnerable, deeply insecure core. Section 3. The cost of abuse. Let's talk about the collateral damage. Understanding their underlying fragility is important, sure, but we also have to look objectively at the absolute wreckage they leave behind. There is a deeply validating thought from the source material: narcissism stunts human growth by creating unsafe emotional environments. If you've ever been in the orbit of someone with NPD, that profound exhaustion you feel, it is not in your head. Their lack of empathy, the constant manipulation, the endless demands, it completely sucks the oxygen out of the room. It makes it literally impossible for healthy human development or true emotional safety to exist.
Let's look a little closer at that collateral damage. When children grow up around a narcissist, they often completely lack the freedom to just make independent choices. To survive that deeply unsafe environment, those kids usually develop intense people-pleasing habits and crippling self-doubt. And for adults exposed to this kind of abuse, the toll is just as heavy. They deeply struggle with shattered self-esteem, destroyed trust, and having absolutely no idea how to set a healthy boundary. Knowing all of this makes one thing incredibly clear. Waiting around, hoping to somehow fix the narcissist is a dangerous trap. We urgently need a solution. Section 4. The Disengagement Blueprint. Time for a tactical withdrawal.
Now, this isn't about waving a magic wand and making everything perfect. This is about a highly tactical withdrawal. The absolute most effective strategy to safely disengage is going no contact. But if you absolutely have to interact, like for co-parenting or work, use the gray rock method. That literally means making yourself as uninteresting and unresponsive as a boring gray rock. You are purposely cutting off the emotional fuel, the attention, and the dramatic reactions that the narcissist desperately needs to keep their false self propped up.
But that brings us to a really crucial question. What actually happens when you ignore a narcissist? When you suddenly turn off the tap on that supply of admiration and reaction they need to survive? What do they do?
Section 5. Surviving the extinction burst. Prepare for predictable reactions.
Here's the thing. A narcissist's reaction to you pulling away isn't random. It is highly, highly predictable. By disrupting their cycle of control, you are basically triggering a sequence of expected counterattacks. It usually plays out chronologically like this. Phase 1 is the escalation cycle, which kicks off right as they realize you're actually withdrawing. If you hold your ground, Phase 2 starts, testing your resolve. And finally, if you still refuse to cave in, you hit Phase 3, the extinction burst. It's really a chronological battle of attrition. Let's break down the actual manipulation tactics you're going to see at each of these steps. In Step 1, escalation, they are desperately trying to regain control fast. You might get hit with intense love bombing, heavy guilt trips, or even a full-blown malicious smear campaign meant to ruin your reputation. Now, if that fails, they move to Step 2, testing. This is way more subtle. They might send an innocent-sounding check-in text or make a nostalgic remark, basically just fishing to see if you'll take the bait and re-engage. And when all that typical charm and persistence doesn't work, bam, they hit Step 3, the burst. This is where extreme, chaotic behaviors suddenly emerge as an absolute last-ditch effort to drag you back into the drama.
So, the absolutely crucial point about this extinction burst is this. You have to prepare for things to get worse before they get better. The manipulation is going to spike. The chaos is going to escalate. You literally have to expect these extreme behaviors because, in their mind, their false self is fighting for its very life. But here's the good news. Knowing that this is just a predictable, temporary phase is exactly what makes it survivable.
Now, just to remain entirely objective here, it is true that while NPD is a notoriously difficult disorder to treat, therapy can actually help those with the condition develop a more authentic sense of self and improve their relationships. But, and this is a big but, that is their journey to take, not yours. As someone focusing on this blueprint today, your tactical priority has to remain your own safety and your own successful disengagement.
We're going to wrap up today's explainer with a pretty big thought to take with you. If narcissism essentially stunts human growth by creating these unsafe emotional environments, how are you going to stop the cycle? How will you use this blueprint to finally reclaim your freedom to make your own independent choices? Look, setting these boundaries is incredibly hard, but it is quite literally the only way to rebuild your autonomy. Thank you so much for exploring this material with us today. Keep learning, stay focused, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring exactly how to take your freedom back.